Is the conflict between Israel and the Palestinians the revival of an ancient conflict recorded in the Bible?
The nation of Israel is a resurrected nation. What if there was going to be a resurrection of another people, an enemy people of Israel?
The Dragon's Prophecy. Watch it now or buy the DVD at thedragonsprophecyfilm.com.
Hi, everyone. I'm Danielle D'Souza Gill, and I am delighted to be guest hosting Dineshie's podcast today. I am his daughter. I'm also the author of 2 books, The Choice, The Abortion Divide in America, and Why God, an Intelligent Discussion on the Relevance of Faith. One is a book where I defend pro-life arguments. Another is a book on Christianity, so make sure to check those out. But today we have a lot to get to. We are going to talk about some news going on. We're going to talk a little bit about, socialism, what the Democrats are up to, what their plans are, how we can attack the midterms. We're also going to go through something a little bit fun. I call it the DINESHIES, where I give out awards to the worst kind of Democrats, the worst winners of the year. When we look back as a recap of 2025, who those should be going to. So it's going to be kind of a fun end of the year show. And so that's going to be interesting. We're also going to have someone you all know and love join the podcast a little bit later today. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
America needs this voice. The times are crazy. In a time of confusion, division, and lies, we need a brave voice of reason, understanding, and truth. This is the Dinesh D'Souza podcast.
It's December, and several parts of the nation have already been visited by considerable snowfall. The air is colder and crisper, and our thoughts turn to the coming Christmas tide. The year is almost over, and despite the Democrats' proven record in outdoing themselves, I think it might be safe to compile a list of the losingest leftist ploys. Yes, this is what we have called in the past the DINESHIES, where we give awards out to different people to kind of end the year with this capstone. The most dumbheaded Democrat declarations, the craziest commie canards, and a host of other honorable mentions that deserve not just our attention, but our outright admiration. 2025 has been a year when the Democrats weren't just content with getting things wrong, but with getting things as wrong as they possibly could. That's right. It's time for the DINESHIES for this year, 2025. So let's start this off with the best example of what these awards are all about. Our first award is for the biggest self-own. Obviously, the winners in this category are the Democrats themselves. So we had to give them their own category to determine what their worst calculated blunder of the year has been. First, we're going to talk about the runners-up. Special honorable mention this year goes to the voters of New York City, the only people left on this planet who have not figured out that communism is a failed political philosophy masquerading as a mode of revenge for disaffected rich kids in New York City who have nothing else to contribute to the society. It's an honorable mention because the owning hasn't really happened yet. If the Democrat voters of New York are capable of learning, an open question given their recent voting patterns, they will learn the hard way. Once Mamdani takes office next year, we'll see. Along those same lines, we have to include the Democrats' strategy to weaponize the release of the Epstein files. This was their attempt to attack President Trump. It obviously didn't work, despite the fact that half the people agitating for the release of the files were outright clients, possibly on his list. We see that Epstein was a Democrat. What did they think was going to come out? Congratulations, Democrats. You played yourselves. Again, the bulk of the fallout for the brilliant move has yet to arrive. But we remain confident the revelations won't be good for their party. Something else to look forward to next year. Next place goes to the Democrats' handling of the shutdown. When it started, everyone said, "Hey, Democrats, you don't have any leverage, so you're just going to have to totally concede to the Republicans anyway." Why not now rather than later? And what happened? The Democrats let the government get shut down. They even let payroll and food benefits lapse for government workers and impoverished citizens, two of their biggest constituents that they obviously try to play towards. Then, after dragging the stalemate out for 43 days, making this the longest shutdown in American history, they only managed to inflict maximum harm on the peoples whose votes they count on the most before they finally pulled the brakes. And they gave in on every point, just like everyone said they would have to do from the start. So, they literally accomplished nothing but hurting their most loyal voters. Hard to know if we should congratulate the Dems or thank them. After all, the sooner their party collapses, the better off we will all be. But wait, we have yet another big announcement, which is the winner of the Democrat biggest self-own of 2025, and that has to go to the Democrats' uncanny ability to take the worst and most unpopular position on every single issue, whether it's immigration, border security, social engineering, defunding the police, co-opting education, government spending. Democrats are underwater with voters on all the issues that matter most. Why do they support such unpopular stances? Their choices so often defy reason. But as the philosopher Pascal writes, the heart has its reasons that reason does not know. Maybe they do it despite President Trump. They still had Trump derangement syndrome as they've had for the last 10 years. But who's really being spited when the Dems rail against DOGE in the interest of protecting government waste, fraud, and abuse? They want to keep the fraud and abuse. Or working to protect USAID in its transparently traitorous operation of funneling taxpayer money to global NGOs, which then take that same money and use it to destroy our country. Or how about this? Why do the Democrats advocate for having grown men compete against women in women's sports? Or in girls' sports? Do we tell them that literally no one is asking for this? Would it matter if we did? Naturally, the Dems have been silent about the border closure as well. That's because they're still against having a functioning border and enforcing our nation's immigration laws. They are completely against those. We can only wonder how Dems will wreck themselves again, even more in 2026. Will they call for replacing all carpets with lava, exporting the moon to Jupiter, outlawing the use of feet? Who knows? They constantly come up with new ways to redefine biology, redefine pretty much everything, and make certain things taboo. And you're a bad person if you do those things, and so on. So we'll see what the Democrats come up with next year. If 2025 has taught us anything, there is no bottom. There is no low to where the Democrats will not go. Along those lines, we have to also acknowledge the failures of leftism outside the field of politics. Because here too, 2025 has shown us some spectacular results. So this next category is biggest self-own by a non-politician. Honorable mention number 1 goes to Cracker Barrel. Remember that whole fiasco, that lovely homey restaurant serving down-home country goodness like mashed potatoes with bacon and cheese, along with a skillet full of cinnamon rolls and maybe some fried chicken. Someone looked at their singular culinary genius and thought, hey, what if we take everything that's beloved and unique to this chain that's kind of homey? Let's get rid of it, though. We don't need any of that anymore, and replace it with the same dreck that's on offer at any of the other 1,000 restaurant chains. That someone was none other than Cracker Barrel's own CEO, the human incarnation of the expression, "This is why we can't have nice things." Well, perhaps surprising no one, the changes were disastrous, and customers as well as stockholders fled the brand. The design and menu makeover were so horrendous that even the CEO claimed in a recent interview with Glenn Beck that she felt like she had been, quote, fired by America. Wow, that is pretty bold. That is pretty true, though. Now, if only her company felt the same way. The next biggest cell phone by a non-politician has to be Hollywood, which had its worst year since Ronald Reagan's first year as president. What does this mean? There are millions more theater goers in 2025 than in 1981. And Hollywood wisely bent over backward to expunge as much of their woke garbage from their movies as they could, subjecting expected blockbusters like the Fantastic Four and Superman movies to numerous revisions. It did not work. Possibly because research shows that brands have a tendency to anthropomorphize in the minds of fans. For IP, that's generally a good thing, but when those brands betray their fans over the course of a decade with woke garbage, preachy, leftist weirdness, the fans get the message and they walk away. That's right. You've kind of ruined it for them. Moviegoers took it personally, broke it off. Good luck recovering from that, Hollywood. The winner of the biggest cell phone by a non-politician has to be the American video game industry. In an age when fatigue over wokeism and DEI incompetence is at its zenith, and AEI has driven the cost of RAM up over 300%, this corner of the tech industry can no longer afford to play cute with repulsive, body-positive characters, girl bosses. They drive gamers back into the arms of retro games. So after a solid decade of substandard games with backgrounds festooned with rainbow flags, the major gaming studios have all begun to collapse. And in walks private equity to buy up the companies along with their IPs and take them private. What kind of private equities? Why, a PE run by Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner in Saudi Arabia. Suffice it to say, the woke is going to be going away because now these game companies have to start earning a profit as opposed to inserting leftism wherever they can. Now, Electronic Arts, EA, one of the most influential media companies, not only for gamers, but also for youth across the globe, is being run by a country that only allowed women to drive in 2018. So think about that. I'm guessing there won't be a whole lot of stories where the villains will be white Christian transphobes anymore. Probably going to come up with a new storyline. It's a well-deserved outcome by any measure. And now we take a short pause. The right has taken a lot of hits this year. Real casualties that have caused real pain. Meanwhile, the left continues to advance their wicked agenda without having to deal with the same level of loss. The breaking of Cracker Barrel, Hollywood, and the video game industry remind us that leftism is on the decline, while conservatism is rightly recognized as the real return to common sense. There have been other casualties of 2025. Casualties that we can celebrate because they aren't innocent fathers or random women minding their own business on a train in a blue city being attacked. So grab your 40-ounce, pop the top, pour out libations out for these people who met their end in 2025. We remember the ratings for Jimmy Kimmel, though boosted for a moment after his public feud with President Trump. The show's ratings soon plummeted to below pre-feud levels. Because suddenly, even more people were reminded that no human person gets laughs or joy from pretty much anything that Jimmy Kimmel has to say. So, RIP to his ratings. We would be remiss if we didn't comment on the death of MSNBC. The demise of this partisan plant load of a channel is a well-earned scalp. Known colloquially as Mess NBC for being such a disjointed jumble of conflicting, untrue Democrat talking points, the network unsurprisingly ended up in the trash bin of historical failures. Now it's so impoverished that it can only afford to pay its top talent to show up to work one day a week. And how long can the newly rebranded MSN now last when it struggles to pay the top talent who ran the network into the ground in the first place? This year is also the year that woke movies died on the altar of Snow White. I have talked about this movie before because I think it just epitomizes the way that Hollywood just hurts itself and kills its own movies. If it had just stuck with classic storyline, what was already come up with, by Walt Disney years before, could have done really well. But no, they had to ruin it. The movie, widely defended by hack industry leftists prior to its release, was a historical flop and took with it the careers of the director Mark Webb and star Rachel Ziegler. Not bad. The latter got into a lot of hot water for trying to shoehorn her personal politics over Gaza into a movie about a 19th century German fairy tale, all while standing right next to her much more attractive Israeli co-star, Gal Gadot. The movie's erstwhile defenders realized all too late that they were defending a piece of cinema malpractice so monumental it earns a place in the cabinet of movie failures somewhere below Ed Wood films, which, while certainly wretched, are at least perhaps entertaining. But the biggest leftist casualty of 2025 has to be the trans movement, which has finally sputtered to an ignominious end, like the half-baked fad that it always was. For years now, everyone from programmers to athletes to random white-collar workers in American companies have been made to bow down and pledge total loyalty to the trans movement or face absolute cancellation. It's only a matter of time before these trans lies bubbled up and exploded. Though it styled itself as a successor of the civil rights movement of the 1960s, of the trans movement, trying to hop on the bandwagon of every other movement, this movement had nothing in common with the widely popular faith-based movement that got rid of Jim Crow laws. No, trans was completely opposite. If we think about the Christian view of people who are all made in the image of God, who have inherent dignity, that is one thing. The trans movement, which seeks to stamp out women, seeks to stamp out gender, even though God created us male and female, two genders. Okay, obviously, transgender movement doesn't go at all, but they were really trying to jump on this train. The trans movement was coercive and unforgiving. Anyone who would disagree with them on anything, they sought to cancel. Even other leftists who even maybe were LGBTQ. No, that was not enough for them because, sorry, they didn't have the Q or the T. I don't know, but you know what I'm saying. They were not trans enough, trans supporting enough. So the trans movement was coercive, unforgiving. Trans rights activists kept public lists of people and entities they considered allies. Those who stood against them were castigated for being complicit in a trans genocide, whatever that means. Suddenly, we were thrust into a world where voicing a completely non-controversial opinion that has been agreed upon for thousands of years on biological gender, or even just accidentally using the wrong pronoun for someone, could end someone's career. Most figuratively, but also alarmingly, there have been literal murders as well. Trans activists and their allies have racked up numerous kills. They have been on a killing spree. Now, the trans, they have mental health issues. They are seriously disturbed human beings, and it's very tragic, and they need help. But we cannot look away from the fact that they are shooting up churches, they're killing children, and it has to be because of the fact that they're in so much mental turmoil. So they have been destroying the lives of many innocents, including parents, children. This was the year the country finally said, we are done with this craziness. We all suddenly realized that we do not need to bow down to a movement that is evil just because if we don't, we're going to be canceled or whatever. It is a weird, violent, coercive movement. It is horrible, and it should not spread in America. And anyone who's in that situation needs help, and we need to hope that they get that help. But most of all, it hurts those who believe in the movement's lies. And notice I haven't even talked about what they did to the children of mentally ill parents, because many parents who are unfortunately indoctrinated with leftism are giving their children, these puberty blockers. They're changing their genders, giving them surgeries. And we've heard from people who have been through this, who regret having gone through that. as a child and want to reverse things, but it's very difficult to reverse because so much just hormonally and physically has already been changed. So we're seeing that there are lives who are just damaged by what is happening. So thank goodness that we are finally having more people who are waking up and turning around from all of this. So goodbye to trans tyranny. I'd like to say it was fun, but it truly wasn't. It was a horrific nightmare to deal with in American history. And so let's just hope that that does not become a popular thing again. Now, we still have issues with it because we still have the left, largely all of the Democrats, not wanting to back away from the trans issue. You'd think they would have seen that, hey, our election didn't go so well with Kamala Harris. Hey, maybe talking about transgender bathrooms and prisons or whatever Kamala was talking about was not great. Maybe they would have thought, we shouldn't really push the trans issue so much. But they haven't really realized that. So I think that we let them keep doing that because it is very harmful to them electorally. Culturally, it's really harmful because it means that we haven't all realized just how harmful it is. RIP to the Kimmel ratings, MSNBC, woke movies like Snow White, and the trans fad. All of those lost to us this year, 2025. Our next big award is for the biggest hater of democracy. This award recognizes the unique contributions of American Democrats to the destruction of the institution they claim to be so dedicated to. They're all about democracy, democracy, democracy. But are they really? So dedicated, in fact, that their name derives from the word. As usual, when Trump is around, masks come off. Turns out Democrats are not so into democracy when it doesn't go their way. This first year of his second term is no exception. One of the biggest perpetrators of destroying democracy goes to an all too familiar foe, Antifa. This group of anti-democracy terrorists have been interfering with law enforcement attempts to get dangerous traffickers, rapists, and abusers off the streets by engaging in direct physical confrontations with police officers. Leftist confrontations aren't isolated events lasting a few hours, as well as, going on by nightfall. No, their clashes have lasted for months at a time and have escalated to the point where ICE officers are even being beaten and shot at. Nobody voted for that, but Antifa doesn't care about votes. They talk a lot about democracy and they're anti-fascist, but I think they actually are the other thing. They actually are fascists. They're the people who march around like the brown shirts who want to keep you in line using violence. They are nothing more than hired hands, ideologues who have gone crazy. Some of them are trans, thugs acting at the behest of their paymasters. They're Soros people, and a lot of them are just completely disaffected. In terms of culpability, they are violent mercenaries. The governors of blue states like California and Illinois, along with their blue city lackey mayors, are much more damaging to American democracy than those thugs. They have set up a confrontation between local, state, and federal power. Governors J.B. Pritzker and Gavin Newsom, along with LA Mayor Karen Bass and Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson, are content exposing the citizens they've sworn to protect to the ravages of violent criminal gangs like Tren de Aragua and NS-13. Yet, once again, showing everyone the truth about the Democrat Party, they're in it for themselves, their own power, their own money, and their own notoriety. They could care less about the people, the demos they serve in democracy. But here too, this conflict between local and federal authority is something that's been baked into our nation's constitution from its founding. That Dems are disingenuously exploiting it to protect criminals is an abuse. What's worse? Well, the Dem judges like Judge Boasberg of the D.C. federal court, who are basically tearing the fabric of this nation apart using a judicial coup to stop President Trump. Ever since President Trump has stepped into office, random judges across the country have weighed in on every action he's taken. You can forget about a democratic mandate when you have judges trying to insert themselves into the military chain of command to stop democracy by telling the commander-in-chief how he's supposed to run the military. We, the people, put him in charge of. And it's actually a national security threat to diminish this role, because that is the role of the president, to be in charge of the military. It has become so bad that one judge has even ruled that he, and not the president, decides if or how a DC building belonging to the executive branch can be power washed. How is that? There are checks and balances between the branches. And then there is whatever this is, whatever these judges are trying to do, which is definitely overreach. America did not elect a board of judicial overlords to tell us whether or not we can do simple things like enforce our own laws. And since when did judges ever come down against actually enforcing laws? Isn't that the whole job description of a judge? If democracy is to mean anything, this tension between the branches is begging for a solution. I think that solution is mass impeachments of these judges. That's why my husband, Brandon Gill, has been impeaching James Boasberg, and yet even the judges aren't the winners of the biggest haters of democracy. We are saving that distinction for the infamous seditious six, Democrat lawmakers who told service members that it's okay to just not follow orders as long as you have a personal beef with them or the man issuing them. What's left to say about these veterans plus one former CIA agent that hasn't already been said? Were any of them in charge of a military unit? None of them would tolerate that type of insubordination that they are advocating for in the military, because it doesn't work. That is not how the military works. It's very hierarchical, and that's the only way you can keep order and make sure that you're getting through your missions and so on. So these Democrats doing this, it's actually extremely harmful to the American people. It's harmful to democracy. It's harmful to our national security. But they play dumb, claiming to just be talking about a random rule at a random time. But there's nothing random about any of this. Not the rule, not the timing. They're relying on the rest of us being stupid so they can get away with this act of sedition. To put their lie to the test, what other PSAs for the military did they do before? What PSAs have they done after? The answer to both is none. To make matters worse, they play ignorant despite the video being right out of a color revolution playbook. Its goal is to foment unrest in the ranks of the military, so it will be powerless to address a crisis like a terrorist attack against National Guardsmen in the nation's capital, or whatever inevitably comes next, and will undoubtedly be worse. The video is another in an increasingly long line of exhibits of evidence that the Democrat Party isn't protecting democracy, but trying to burn it all down. Congratulations to all the recipients of this year's DINESHIES. Hopefully, next year, there won't be so many deranged autocrats vying for the honor, but you never know. You typically have a lot of different Democrat factions who are trying to make the list. So let's hope that it doesn't get worse next year. And that wraps up the DINESHIES.
Christmas, yes, we can say Christmas, is a time of giving, and there's nothing better than knowing that what you give results in saving the life of an innocent baby. And for every baby we save, there's a mom who was saved from a lifetime of regret. Every Christmas stocking you will look at this month is a blessing in your life. Won't you make that possible for a mom today? Preborn provides free ultrasounds to girls and women, and an ultrasound doubles the chance she'll choose life. $140 gives 5 free ultrasounds and saves babies. Just $28 a month can save a baby a month for less than $1 a day. And if you're looking for the perfect tax-deductible end-of-year giving idea, I can't think of a better one than $15,000 gift, which provides an ultrasound machine, saving thousands of lives for years to come. Whether you want to save one baby or hundreds or thousands, join me saving babies right now. Make it a Merry Christmas. Here's how you do it. Call 833-850-2229. The number again, 833-850-2229, or go to preborn.com/Dinesh. MyPillow is still going on with their big 3-in-1 sale. They got a limited edition product, a back in stock special, and a closeout deal you won't find anywhere else. MyPillow bed sheets, just $29.88. Any color, any style, any size, even kings. Regular price $119.98 and now only $29.88. But once they're gone for good, so act now. My towels are finally back in stock. Get a 6-piece My Towel set, regular price $69.98, now only $39.98. And for the first and only time, get their limited edition premium My Pillows made with Giza cotton and a designer gusset, queen size $17.98, kings only $19.98. Also for a limited time, when you order over $100, you get free shipping plus $100 in free digital gifts. Call 800-876-0227. That's 800-876-0227. Or go to mypillow.com. Use promo code Dinesh for the best offers ever. Quantities are low, so order now. It's mypillow.com, and the promo code is DINESH, Dinesh.
Well, we have a very special guest today, your very favorite host. No, it is not me, sadly. It is Dinesh, who is here today. Today, we talked about these awards, the DINESHIES. I gave out awards today to our very own worst of the worst Democrats of the year, biggest faux pas of 2025. So, Dinesh, maybe I will just kick it off by asking you, if you were to give an award to the worst Democrat of the year, who would you pick and why?
Probably Mamdani, because I think that that might be, as we look back on it over time, a very significant turn for the Democratic Party. And I say this because the fact that they're able to capture New York, I won't be surprised if this Mamdani formula is tried in other blue cities. And remember, we have blue cities right here in Texas. So it doesn't mean that because, we're in a blue state, we're not going to see Mamdaniism creep even into the places like Tennessee or Florida or Texas. So because of the significance of it, I think also the other thing about it is that if Sharia comes to America, it's not going to look like bin Laden, it's going to look more like Mamdani. In other words, a guy of a multicultural background. He likes rap music, and he's got the African connection. He likes all kinds of cuisine. He relates to young people. He dresses and talks cool. So he is, in that sense, a greater threat than somebody who has kind of a ridiculous Taliban-style beard and is brandishing a sword.
Yes. But how is Mamdani, let's say, worse than these other Democrat mayors? All these cities are already run by Democrats, and they're so blue, they're riddled with crime, they're horrible. I don't even know, Bowser, all these other mayors that come to mind. So do you feel like Mamdani is going to be worse because he's more of an outright communist, or because of the things he wants to do, or because he's kind of cool and is trying to make these things more mainstream? Or what do you think is the bigger threat?
It's two parts. One of them is that while a number of these blue city Democrats, let's say, Brandon, Johnson, Chicago, for example, they're very left-wing. They're clearly moving in the direction of socialism. But on the other hand, they don't avow or profess explicitly to be socialists. And as a result, it's almost like they take you toward the precipice, but they're not going to take you probably off the precipice, because they also have business interests that support them. They recognize that markets are generally necessary to create wealth, even if they proceed then to figure out how they can distribute that wealth. They say things like defund the police, but often they don't follow through, or they only follow through partially. Now, Mamdani is very explicit, and one thing about being explicit about I'm a democratic socialist, I'm campaigning on that, he can then say, well, I've been voted in, I have a mandate to go the whole hog. So that's the first part of it. The second part of it is he combines both aspects of the red-green alliance. He's got the socialism, which is the red part, but he's got the green part too. And that long-term could end up being more significant, because what you can do as mayor, you're not all powerful. You can't take over people's land or their property. You can't just seize apartments. There are
Mhm.
limits on that. But what you can do is you can open the floodgates. You can give permits for innumerable new mosques. You can allow people to be praying on the street and blocking the traffic and not do a whole lot about that. So the Islamization of New York, I expect we're going to see a lot of that under Mamdani. New York starts looking more like some of, we've already have London looking like Londonistan, and we might be moving a little closer to New Yorkistan. And so Mamdani, because he represents those two distinct and yet allied elements of the left, that's unique. Brandon Johnson
Mhm.
doesn't have that. The mayor of
Mhm.
LA doesn't have that. And even in Minneapolis, it's kind of funny, but the white guy, Jacob Fry, who's a big left winger, was able to beat the Muslim essentially by appealing to the tribalism of the Somalis. So the
Oh boy.
Somalis apparently are divided into tribes. And this white guy, in a very sneaky way, figured out there are lots of tribes that don't like Ilhan Omar and don't
Mm,
like this guy Fateh. So this guy
mm.
basically goes, I'll be the white face of your tribal interests and conflicts. And so, in Minneapolis, you're right, you got a left winger, but he represents only one side of the Red Green Alliance, even though he's always professing loyalty to the Somali community. It's kind
Yeah.
of quite comical to watch.
Wow. Well, we definitely have to ratchet up the deportations over there. And not to mention in New York. I mean, maybe we can deport more of these illegals because they're all over the place in these sanctuary cities. I don't know if you saw this, but Mike Lindell may be running for the governor of Minnesota. So, how do you think that would go? Tim Walz versus Mike Lindell.
Well, let's just say you have two major characters. I mean, Mike Lindell is, I really like the guy. I've known him over many years. Obviously, I've been selling his pillows and have sold a whole bunch of them. And
Promo
Mike is a
code Dinesh.
promo code, yes, promo code Dinesh.
Or
Mike
should I
is
say
a
Danielle? No, I'm
oh,
just
promo
kidding.
code Danny. Well, Mike is a really good entrepreneur. He's very intense. In fact, I think the first time I met him, we were at an Italian restaurant right here in Texas. He sat down. He had never met me before. We shook hands, and he spoke for 30 minutes straight. And I just sat there in sort of dumbfounded amazement because it was like not a conversation at all. Now, I think that is Mike. He's super intense. Later on, he relaxes, and of course, we've had conversations subsequently. Let's put it this way: he would make the race very interesting, and it's a new step for him. He's been involved, of course, in the issues of election integrity and so on. But running for governor would be a whole different step for Mike. Tim Walz is obviously an absolute disaster. And I don't think that all this fraud that's coming out in Tim Walz's estate can be attributed to just mere like a bureaucratic incompetence, or people say, well, Tim Walz is so ignorant and he doesn't really know what's going on in his own state. I think he actually does know. This
Yeah.
is more of like a RICO operation,
Mhm.
a an elaborate racket that is conducted by nonprofits, but the Democratic establishment is in on it. Elected officials are in on it. The administrative structure of the state is in on it. It gives everybody different types of dividends. And let's remember that the people being ripped off here are the taxpayers. So it's a way of funding left-leaning and Democrat-oriented groups. It's a way of registering illegals to vote. It's a way of ultimately redirecting funds in a circular fashion to the campaigns of these Democrats who are then subsequently running for office. All of this needs to be busted wide open and busted ruthlessly by the DOJ. So to me, Pam Bondi is well-meaning, but has been a little bit sluggish, and I'd like to see a real ramping up of her operation.
Yeah, it reminds me of, with all of the election fraud, just all of this, it seems like the Democrats, they've really figured out their system, which is to use these kind of Somali refugees, illegals, homeless, whoever it is, these groups They bring them in, they usher them into the country, they find ways to get them to vote. And I'm just using that one example, but there's a lot of other bad things they're up to. But then it somehow gets back to the Democrats because they get the votes. They're willing to give these people, I guess, abuses of welfare or all these things, and then they benefit from those. So it benefits both of those groups. And the people who get ripped off, yes, it's the taxpayer, but also they end up electing people like Ilhan Omar. And we have all these horrible representatives that shouldn't even be in office. So what's the next step? I mean, how do we make sure that this is stopped in a sense that is just all over the country? This is kind of part of their playbook. Because if they couldn't run this playbook, I don't know if they would have a majority necessarily ever.
It needs to be treated like organized crime. And when the federal government goes after organized crime, they specify an elaborate conspiracy. Now, the good thing about framing it this way is that then you show that the conspiracy requires all these elements to participate in it. And each element may not be doing all the things in the conspiracy. Just like if you rob a bank, one guy is the getaway driver, another guy keeps an eye out, a third guy's job is to, crack the safe. And so
Mhm.
the conspiracy wouldn't work if it didn't have all these elements, but each element may not be doing the whole thing and doesn't even have to be in on the whole thing. But nevertheless, looked at, you can see that there is an organized operation that relies on the collaboration of all these elements. I think that's the way to go after it. And once you bust it, remember, one of the benefits of like 2000 Mules was that you couldn't do the same thing in 2024.
Mhm.
The racket had been sort of exposed, and so people would be looking for
Yeah.
it. And so similarly here, if you can make an example out of Tim Walz's Minnesota, I think you will start forcing other jurisdictions to start pulling back on this kind of racket because, hey, they'd all have to fear we could be next.
Yeah. Yeah. And the Democrats, they don't really have any fear. They operate with impunity and they just do pretty much whatever because they figure, oh, even if we get caught, nothing's really going to happen to us anyways. But you've been traveling. You went to a PragerU gala yesterday. You spoke at Mar-a-Lago. So I heard you had a great experience, but tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I gave, I would call it the most unusual invocation in probably recent US history because they asked me to do the invocation, which is very unusual for me. I'm like not a pastor or priest. And so I gave them a very Dineshian invocation that involved a little bit of archaeology, a little bit of Christian apologetics, and it was only in the most broad-minded way of characterizing it could you call it really sort of a prayer, but it had prayer-like elements in it. So you have to watch it. It's on my social media, and I know you'll get a chuckle out of it, and probably other people will too. So it was fun. I went to Mar-a-Lago, and not only that, but I, for the first time, stayed in Mar-a-Lago, which was. First of all, I didn't even know you could do that. When we did the 2000 Mules premiere, and of course you were there, you might remember that had talked to Caitlyn Jenner, and Caitlyn Jenner said, I'll come to your premiere, but Dinesh, you got to arrange for me to stay at Mar-a-Lago. And I was like, I don't have that kind of clout. Because I thought staying in Mar-a-Lago meant like staying in the Trump
Well, I don't
residential
think you can
quarters.
just book it online. Let's put it that
No, no,
way.
no. It's not open to the
It's
public, and
like
the
private.
no, no. That's right. So don't call Mar-a-Lago and say, "Yeah, I'm going to be in the area. I kind of want to stay there, next week." I believe if you organize an event, and this is what Prager did, of course, in the ballroom, and they had 500 people there. Mar-a-Lago does have a few rooms, and I think it's something like 25. It's not a big number. So I
Okay.
think what happened is
Maybe
the
for like the
speaker.
members of the club, if they have someone who they want to
Maybe it's
stay
open to
there or something
them
like that.
and also to people who essentially rent the entire ballroom to
Mm.
do a major event, which, as costs a lot of money to do. Anyway, it was a lovely event, very elegant, people beautifully dressed. Glenn Beck was there and spoke, and Larry Elder gave a very amusing address. And many people I knew were there, so it was just fun to see people that you don't normally see in daily
Yeah.
life. And then I'm
Mm.
off a little later this week, well, tomorrow night, heading to Brazil to for some business meetings connected with movies. There's actually a very successful, almost like a Brazilian version of Netflix in
Mm,
Brazil.
okay.
And these are people who want to launch a movie platform in America. And so this is the project we're going to be talking about.
Wow. Well, that's exciting. What was your reaction to the special election Tennessee 7 race where Matt Van Epps won, the Republican? Some people are saying, oh, it was still a little closer than it should have been. That means that there might be troubled waters in the midterms. Some people are sort of saying that, this was a referendum. And of course, this is more what the liberals are saying. This is a referendum on how things are going in the country so far. But on the other side, people say, actually, this isn't a referendum on Trump because Trump wasn't on the ballot. When Trump is on the ballot, we win more. We win big. What this district went R plus 22 for Trump, but normally it's an R plus 10. And I'm pretty sure their results came out where it came out to an R plus 9. So my read on it was when Trump's on the ballot, tons of voter turnout, lots more low propensity voters are coming out to vote for Trump because they love Trump. Otherwise, some of those people may not be totally tuned in. And then the district goes back to R plus 10. But the Democrats also spent a lot of money. They were really pumping it for this because they wanted to flip this seat. And so they took a point from us, I guess, and it went to R plus 9. But so I don't really think it necessarily means that. But what do you think the message is from this race for the midterms?
I mean, I think you have a better grasp of the on the ground situation with these sorts of campaigns than I do. I can just say that having watched the Democratic candidate, Atrabane or Aftrabane, anyway,
It's just a strange name.
very strange name,
I
but
don't know
uh,
how you
but you
say
know
that.
she was kind of affable enough, it seems, on the surface, but then she had all these weird positions, which
Mm,
got me to think, if you're trying to run a Democrat in a red state, don't
mm,
you want to find somebody who is kind of centrist, who's going
mm.
to play the Obama playbook of, well, I'm really wrestling with the issues, and I'm very thoughtful. I listen to both sides. That would give the
Mm,
Democrats the best kind of chance to win this kind of seat. But I think what
yeah.
happens is that their money and their activism is not in that direction. So they
Mm,
end up with a left wing candidate. Maybe also they were a little drunk with the success of Mamdani and also
mm,
the race in New Jersey. And they thought, well, if we can pull this off, we'll do better if we can get a left wing person in. And of
yeah.
course, we do know in Georgia that with the two senators in Georgia, they are
Mm,
actually Warnock and um,
yeah.
they're pretty left
And
wing. They're
Ossoff.
not centrists.
No, they are not. That's the thing. The Democrats, they get people in, but those people don't represent swing areas or in the way that they behave. They're usually just either hardcore leftists or you get a Republican. If you get a Republican, there could be some, either moderate or they're more right wing. But on the Democrats, they're pretty much all left, far left, unless you're Fetterman or something, maybe an exception. But it's interesting because I think at least in liberal Twitter land. I think I was looking at her campaign manager or someone who works with her's page, and they were all saying something like, oh, if this race hadn't gotten nationalized, we would have done better. If you're a Democrat who wants to be in a swing district or flip a red seat, you basically got to kind of fly under the radar. Don't alert the Republicans there's a special election. Don't alert anyone of what's happening. Let's catch them while they're sleeping so they won't really come out. We'll get our people to come out and no one will really know who we are. So I think they're saying their goal is to run candidates who are kind of off the beaten path, a little strange. They're not, a classic Democrat or something. At least that's what their political operatives are saying. Um, and of course, Republicans, they're busy. Sometimes they don't always follow these special elections.
Well, I think what this tells us, and even what you said earlier about Trump, is that there has to be a way, and Trump can make this happen, to federalize the midterm. So, you say Trump is not on the ballot, but Trump can put himself on the ballot, not literally, but he
Yeah.
can put himself on the ballot by basically saying, listen, my agenda is up for grabs right here. I'm doing deportations, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I will be stopped dead in my tracks if I don't have the House and the Senate. So if you want to save your country, if you like the things that I'm doing, if you want me to be able to keep doing them for the 4 years that I have here to get this done, then you got to vote for my team. Otherwise, you are voting against me. And so Trump is to kind of make this about himself.
Yeah.
And I think he can do that. And we have a year to do that. So I'm not panicked about the midterms. I do think that if we're going to give people some bitter pills to swallow, the first year is a really good time to do it. And then, because as you get closer to the election, the focus is very much on what are the things that we need to do in order to be reelected.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's so much more we need to do, but at the same time, we need to operate in unison because if we lose the midterms, we lose the Senate or the House, it's going to be Trump impeachment all over again. And Trump can still do executive orders, but he can't do a lot of other things. And so I know there's growing frustration. Why isn't more happening from, all three branches? But at the same time, it needs to get better, but also it would only get worse, which is horrible, but it's true if we lost them. So we need to make sure people are motivated to turn out. And so hopefully we still have a year to build up that momentum and to get a lot more done by then. Well, thank you so much for coming on your podcast and joining us today. And
when I return on Monday, I might be speaking at least a few words of Portuguese. Remember that my last name is Portuguese, even though most people know I don't have any actual Portuguese heritage. But Portuguese is spoken more in Brazil, because it's a bigger country, than in Portugal. So if there are a fair number of Portuguese speakers in the world, most of them are in Brazil. As you know, most of the rest of Latin America speaks Spanish. But Brazil, which is the largest country on the continent, is an exception. In Brazil, they speak Portuguese. I'm not sure why I'm telling you all this, but
that is a fun fact. We are not Portuguese. I know we don't know any. I would even say goodbye in Portuguese. I don't even know what it is. And needless to say, only know adios in Spanish. But we will see you back on Monday. Well, that wraps up today's show. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to find me on social media. I am at Danielle D'Souza Gill. I am on Facebook, frequently posting on there, very active on Facebook, also on Instagram if you want to get news, updates, things like that. I'm on X, also True Social, Rumble, YouTube, all the platforms. So make sure to find me, Danielle D'Souza Gill. And thanks so much for joining us today. I'll see you tomorrow.
Subscribe to the Dinesh D'Souza podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify, or watch on Rumble, YouTube, and SalemNow.com.